and I've mentioned this before, so this isn't the first time, but I was told by a former Department of Defense official, now retired, that he was aware of U.S. Monitoring of a Soviet PK experiment in 1976, where they were attempting to bend a spoon from 1,000 miles away. Now, you just showed in one of those slides of some sort of experiment from 66, it said there, from Moscow to Novosibirsk. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how far away that is, but that might be 1,000 miles. It might be the same sort of setup they were using in 76 to bend a spoon. And this individual told me, and I'm allowed to talk about this, that it bent. They all were listening in, and it definitely bent, but they never told a single person outside of that room. I guess until I was told about it, they didn't tell the remote viewing unit that the Soviets could do this. Now, I asked Lynn Buchanan, were you ever aware of this 1976 Soviet PK experiment? He goes, well, not that one in particular. We were aware that they had people over there that were very good, but he said we could do it too. So you can imagine this sort of psychic arms race for real. I mean, they're seeing this and they, you just can imagine going through their minds bending something at 1,000 miles. I mean, think of the implications of that if you're involved in, national security.
Yeah, if you want to, you could bring down Air Force One. You could bring the worst things possible.
Exactly.
It gets much deeper, Doc. The rabbit hole gets uglier.
Go ahead.
Did a series of experiments. Not only the Chinese, but the Russians did the same exact experiment, basically, where they took wooden matchsticks and put them inside essentially film canisters, and people were able to snap them. They were more snapped with groups, like you're saying, which is one of the things that stood out to me. And then when you say that about that experiment, it becomes more, I don't know, impactful to me. But also some individuals, rare individuals, a couple individuals are cited as being able to do everything at a statistical, increase than the others who are good even. So there's some super talents. There's the baseline, everyone has a talent. There's people who train up and get to a level ahead of the average, person. And then there's just super talents, natural super talents. And that's the kind of the structure that they perceived. In fact, when we got cut off again, I just want to explain to the viewers, I'm very sorry about the cutoffs in this episode. We've had a bunch of electrical problems, just like we've been talking about. We were just talking about a minute ago, the director saying that it causes electrical problems. And of course, we've had like 10. So I apologize, but I'm going to air this episode anyway. And I hope Doc will too, despite the technical errors, because the content is so kind of, I think just really important to go through. Let me share screen again and try, Doc, to get this stuff back again. And hopefully we won't have any more of these kind of errors messing with us. Okay, so here's where we were before, right? I believe. Can you see everything, Doc?
Yes.
Okay, at the bottom of the screen, it says, a nationwide telepathy experiment is to be carried out within the next few months. And it has a little number there. It looks like 1967. Oh, 04-1967. I would love to find out the results of that. All Soviet citizens have been alerted to this test, which will originate telepathic transmission from Moscow at scheduled times. This test has been characterized by CIA as a nationwide talent hunt. Fascinating.
Wow. I get it.
I get it too. Fascinating. So this is just the tip of the iceberg of the laying of hands, the implications on psychotherapy and the placebo effect. There's just so many crazy stories too in some of these things. And we haven't even touched the Chinese stuff, which is stunning. There's one of these documents where a scientist goes to Russia and goes to all the different institutes to check out the best of the best. And he comes back and he's debriefed by the CIA and he's blown away by the stuff that he saw firsthand. He was convinced, there was no trickery. What's her name again? Kulgina, that woman, the Kulgina experiments.
Yeah.
EEG. What, I saw some with dead people? What the F? Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Okay. Okay. During the Kulgina experiments, a new device called a wireless EEG, it must be an electroencephalogram. Is that what that is? I don't know. Was used to detect some sort of energy pulsing around Kulgina while she was demonstrating the PK effect. Other reports indicate that these same rather sophisticated devices had been used to test clinically dead people. When ordinary EKGs and EEGs register nothing, these detectors register some sort of energy. Dr. Abraham Hoffer and Dr. Harold Kelm of the University of Saskatchewan are doing similar research with devices very similar in design. Wow. Western observers report that the best parapsychological work done in the Soviet bloc countries was being done in Bulgaria by Dr. Ezganov. He's been in the field for 30 years. He claims a high level of support and possesses the only nationalized psychic in the world, Vanga, who is famous all over Eastern Europe and even the USSR. Vanga. Lazanov is reportedly to have institutes all over the world, India. Interesting. I want to find out more about Vanga, a famous psychic. And this machine, too, sounds fascinating, doesn't it?
Well, you know, Ingo went there. Ingo went there with Beverly Yeager. And they got to meet a lot of these people. And you remember Ed May wrote this book, ESP Wars, East and West, published a few years ago.
Yes.
They talked with, after the Cold War ended, they went over there and talked with a lot of their counterparts about, you know, what they had found and what would work and what didn't work. And so,
in fact, Ed May, in one of these documents, is cited. This was a CIA document. Ed May did some work with Ingo Swann about random number generators, and the CIA was very interested in their success, in Ingo's level, and in the experiments. I'd love to show you that in just a moment, too. But I thought this was a couple interesting little lines about these different scientists. One thinks that time is the carrier of the telepathic information. Pfft, beats me. Fascinating. You know, let me find that other document. This document is still not done. There's tons more stuff in here. Filmed experiments.
Can you share your screen with me again? I lost it for a second.
Excuse me?
Can you share your screen with me again? I can't see it.
Oh, no. Share. Is it there?
There, I'm back. Okay, I got it.
Got it. Beautiful.
Wow, look, there's a lot of redacted sections there. What was that again? Go back.
This was Kulgina, Nina Kulgina.
Yeah. She was their famous psychic.
Yeah. Wireless EEG done with her. I guess they're hiding the names of the report, maybe.
The names of the report. These are classified names. So
interesting. 69, 70. Testing for cryptological. The purpose of ESP experiments herein described is threefold: to determine what human extra perceptive capabilities, temporarily categorized telepathy and clairvoyance, could have an effect on ComSec. So this is the, you know, they're looking for the threats. Some of the prime targets would be code and cipher key materials. Interesting. They want to know what factors enhance the phenomena, which is a logical thing. They want to find talented subjects. So if those things can be determined, of course, they want to find defenses against these things. I'm just click to this just really quickly.
Well, they talk about the decline factor there. That's interesting. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And that's something a lot of people don't know about. You want to explain that to the general folks? Because I think a lot of people think, you know, once you're ESP, or, you know, it's always perfect. It's always one level, or, you know.
Yeah. Buddy, this is a subject that comes up at every conference I've been to about these phenomena, which is that often in the beginning you get these outstanding results from the point of view of the researcher who's interested in finding a result. Mm-hmm. I mean, you should really be neutral, but obviously when people study this, they want to see that something's there if they put a lot of time into it. And you find that the effects decline after a while. Apparently, well, there are many reasons. One of them is just boredom. If you're just using a simple psi tester, forced choice, you know, which one of the Zener cards is going to show up, right? The wavy pattern, the star, the square, right? That becomes boring after a while, and you get a decline effect.
Even your subconscious gets bored, and it's hard to make your subconscious bored.
Gets bored, saying this is, you know, I can hear Ingo saying, hey, I can send my mind anywhere in space and time. This is a trivialization of my abilities.
I love
Right.
the line he said, they said, can you read this image that's in the other room? He's like, if I wanted to read the image in the other room, I'd just go over and open the door. Why don't you test the real abilities? Go somewhere far,
If you want to see what's in the box, open the box.
open the freaking box, man. So there's a lot more of these tests here and results with codes. They were trying to guess codes. They tested individuals versus groups. Let's just look at a couple of the conclusions. Since the controls of the experiment were not considered stringent enough to eliminate all possibilities, it must be concluded the testing method was only possibly an acceptable vehicle. Doesn't just give the actual results. Oh, fairly, so let's go. Significant. Okay, so better than average. Oh, they did know better than average. Those two did. Fully controlled conditions. So if anyone, this stuff is really interesting. If anyone wants to read it, I will take the burden on myself to send to as many people want it, because this is, I think, important information to know. Do you mind if I jump into another document? Even though this one has so much more to go, as you can see, there's stuff on all sorts of different types of stuff.
Please do. What is that? Well, what was that back down there? There was some sort of chart of casualties.
Yeah. All right. Oh, here we go. Attack, target, killed, men, women, children. Let's see what this is about. Oh,
what is that for?
I think this is for determining codes. So it's psychics trying to read the different codes, what they mean. I think that,
I see.
Gosh, this mouse is so sensitive. It also looked like it showed some test results too down here. Oh, here we go. Target, killed, men, woman. Participants, testing group. Oh, I told you who the
Look at that.
I wonder who some of those names were, Doc, because we know a lot of the best psychics from that era and that
We
time
know
period.
a lot of the best, and we want to know that they told us the truth about what they've been doing. Right?
Yes, and if they were involved in experiments that actually hurt plant life or hurt life.
Or shrimp, as you mentioned to me, shrimp.
Yes, there's a stunning one of these in here that we were looking at earlier, where they found out that shrimp dying next to a plant has a irrefutable effect on the plant. Pretty stunning. Pretty stunning.
A psychic effect on the plant. It's not a release of chemicals in the water or something. It's a
No, it was a physical effect, and it was a repeatable effect. It wasn't a esoteric effect. I mean, it was a metricable effect.
Not trivial. So keep your shrimp happy. This is the moral. Don't be mean to those shrimp.
That's for sure. But what it also,
I just have to say, I'm just so surprised again. We talked about this morning, and it's been released. It's obviously been declassified, but I haven't seen any discussion of this document until you pulled it out of the magician's hat for me this morning.
And the implications of all of these studies is stunning. Let's just think about the shrimp plant thing just for a second. It sounds stupid. It sounds ridiculous. But the implications of just that study alone says that life feels life. Life is connected to life. In the past, we've talked about how we're connected to everything in the universe. And yeah, it's pretty neat to be connected to non-physical objects like a remote viewing target. But to know that we're literally physically connected to all life, there's some responsibility in that. You know what I mean, Doc? It's not just a novelty. There's a responsibility. And that's why I think, when people who pursue this stuff, if you're a good altruistic person, you gravitate to healing, because you think of that as the highest expression of these things. Wow, did my meeting get dumped again? My computer's doing something.
No, you're still with us, but your screen is
doing all sorts of cool stuff. That's awesome. Let me see okay, we're back. All right. So, Doc, there's a responsibility in this.
Yes, there's a big responsibility. And this is, we're seeing this from a narrow national security set of criteria. And national security institutions look for threats. This is what they all do. It doesn't matter what country, they all do the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it's Russia, China, United States, Iran, anyone. All those institutions are always looking for threats. That's sort of what they're paid to do. And we're kind of seeing it through that lens. I haven't seen any negative consequences of this in the people that I've taught, I have to say I've seen people start spontaneously do channeling. People who never did it in their life, voices would start coming to them, but they kind of got used to it and felt like it was okay.
Wow.
People started, it was kind of like what Kevin Day was talking about with the Nimitz in this roundtable discussion that we were talking about this morning, that's available from the UFO News Network on YouTube. I've encountered people that started spontaneously drawing and painting beautiful works of art who never did this before in their life from taking an RV class. So I've seen unexpected consequences for people, but I've never seen any negative consequences. No one's ever, honestly, I've never heard anyone say, this is so bad, I'm really sorry I learned this. Everyone feels like it showed them another side of themselves that they didn't know was there in one way or another. A lot of people. But this is very negative, what we're seeing here. It's very negative.
It's a very cynical perspective on it.
Very cynical. Yeah.
It all reminds me of this analogy I keep coming back to. It's like humanity is a teenager, and we're about to be given the keys to the car. We're about to turn 18. And when you turn 18 and you get the keys to the car, you get to the keys to travel, to leave the planet, anti-gravity and all that stuff. When you get the keys, you have a bunch of other responsibilities that now come, and ethics that come flooding onto your shoulders. And to accept the reality that your mind affects things around you, and that life affects life, that we're all connected, there's a responsibility there. You can no longer pass the person who's suffering next to you indifferently, because you are connected. All these things, there's a responsibility in all this stuff, and it's fascinating. But
it's responsibility, and we're not talking about the military responsibility. We're talking about the average citizen being responsible for how they employ whatever tools they have around them. We all know things that are dangerous, but they can also be used in a beneficial way, like cars, right?
Right. Fire.
Yeah, fire, cars. There's a long list of things that fit into this category. But when we're seeing it here, it's just from a very concerned, almost paranoid perspective. I just want people to keep that in mind, because the experience I've had with it has been entirely positive. I'm sure you feel the same way, buddy. I mean, almost everyone we know who's been involved with this has just learned a lot about themselves and how the universe works, and come up with some very startling observations about how things are connected in ways that you never would have thought if you had just relied on traditional Western education, right?
It draws a parallel to the ET phenomena as well, because the same kind of tactics of suppressing this information by the government, the same kind of consequences of accepting this bigger, greater reality that we're all entitled to know about. There's all these things that make the two concepts very, very similar,
Well, we have to remember, let's just remember that, having heard Skip Atwater lecture about this, and he was one of the people from the inside of the military security, apparatus, kind of like counter security measures to see how vulnerable facilities were to, hostile intrusion. Mm-hmm. You could imagine people like that would have been very concerned that everything they had done would be for naught if you had psychics somewhere back behind the Iron Curtain affecting your computers and your devices and sabotaging things and reading your crypto keys and your ciphers and all of this. So I understand their concern, and we have to keep in mind we're reading it from that point of view. This is not a document that was probably ever intended for public consumption and discussion, right?
Yeah.
From the point of view that you and I come to it was, how can this benefit the average person in their life, right?
Yeah. And think of it this way. This going to sound a little nutty, but the more you realize that minds have the ability to literally do incredible things, people can use that notion to do very creative, dynamic things. What if 50 people got together and decided to concentrate on the ill health of our president? Or what if, and these are in another country, it took less than that for 9/11 in the whole scheme. What if, there's all these different things in it? It just opens up a whole new future. And it reminds me once again.
It's true. They didn't know at the time. I mean, let's say 50 people could get together and do that. That would be, alarm bells would be going off, right?
Yeah. Or affect his mental capacity, make him seem goofy or tweet more often.
Yes, we
That
need more tweets from the commander-in-chief. I don't have enough of those.
But there's one hopeful thing in here, and it seems like an inevitable direction that we're going. As these abilities come out more and more, society claims them more, people claims them more, but technology gets more and more powerful. We know that transparency is going to be the one thing I think that saves us, that saves society. Transparency, powerful thing. We can find the lone wolf, who's trying to, use a nuclear weapon, or we can find the 50 people who are coming together trying to think of the ill health of our president. There's this transparency that comes from being connected to the lineman, what I call the lineman, other people call the Akashic record, or the source, the oneness, the program, the place where RV comes from. When you tap into that, there's this wonderful transparency. So maybe, I have nothing to fear from transparency. I love it, but that some people, like the military and the government, don't quite feel the same way. They'd rather know what I'm doing rather than me the same. Them.
Lineman, are you talking about key lime pie?
No, and not the lineman on
No,
football.
the limit, subliminal, the limit. Yeah,
what's in Sprite? It's lineman.
I'm kidding with you. I'm kidding. That's what it's called. It's not a word everyone's familiar with. It's the root of subliminal is the limen, the lineman. How to pronounce it? It's the threshold of awareness. The threshold of awareness.
Yeah, it's a place where no measurements can take place, essentially.
Well, this is fascinating stuff. So we have another document here, and this is concerns about ESP, and they should be isolated by type and quality.
Check this out.
Within
this is an NSA document, okay? And they want to find out the people within the NSA who have these abilities, that they should be isolated based on their specialties, by their type and their quality. And if you scroll down here, you'll see after these gifted people are isolated and tested for the quality of their gifts, they should be tested against communication systems and consec systems to check out vulnerabilities. Here's an interesting one. Any person with telekinetic powers or problems should be isolated and studied to determine what triggers the capability, intensity, damage, everything else. Here's where it starts to get really fascinating. Number 5, a cadre of talented, synergized, gifted people should be formed for special problem-solving tests. They're looking to form the X team, basically the X-Men.
X-Men, wow, here it is.
This is This is concerning. Now, this was a top secret NSA document, you can see. The number of high-grade talented psychics of various types should be isolated by type in their individual names and locations listed, especially in the US, Europe, China, and the Soviet and Union and bloc countries. They want to know who we are and how good we are and which one of us. So you can be sure, Doc, there's a number by your name. You're being tracked by the NSA, my friend. Me, I'm not, because I've erased that in the computer of theirs.
Yes, well, I'm going to use my PK abilities to psychically redact all of the information about me. We're just going to turn those ones and zeros into random bits.
Or we already did.
We already did. It's already done. Poof.
So they talk about the need to discover defensive capabilities. They talk about testing people for psychological and all sorts of other aspects because they don't want to have to deal with a dangerous or unscrupulous psychic. So
what was that about? There was one other thing, a couple more lines there about screening out people that are conscienceless. So they're talking about people without a conscience, so sociopathic people.
Yeah.
Severe mental illness. Yes. Wow. What a document. I'm just, again, I would have thought somewhere along the line after about 15 IRVA conferences, International Remote Viewing Association, that this document would have come up just as proof that the government took it seriously. I mean, if you keep in mind, buddy, there's always this counter argument from skeptics that the government didn't take it seriously, that there was no proof that it was real. And now I would say this is a smoking gun document right here. This is a smoking gun document that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, assuming it's not a forgery, which doesn't be any evidence of that this proves that the security organizations were extremely concerned about the implications of all of these
At the
psychic.
highest level of government,
At the highest
of
level.
intelligence. I wanted to see if we had seen this document or not. Oh, this looks like it's 1963. ESP, a threat to ComSec. Did we already see this one? Let me see.
No, I didn't see this one. This is interesting. What is this?
Oh,
Teilhard de Chardin. So,
this might be
back.
the
Wow.
one. Let me back up to the beginning. I'm sorry. Extrasensory perception. Let me go all the way back. Okay. All right. What about the key something to the through the right pat files? Oh, the right pat files here. What about
secret right pat files? I knew we would come across these someday.
I've been talking about Right Pat, the basement of Right Pat for a while. There's some very interesting stuff on the
Blue Room, huh?
I happened to do a little remote viewing that's hidden on the internet somewhere.
I see. Even Barry Goldwater couldn't find out what was in the Blue Room, huh?
Okay, so let's check out this. Oh, this was the stuff about a notion that all life together creates a larger organic entity. General thoughts on the relationship. According to Einstein, there is one absolute, that all things exist in relation with something else. All things are oriented as a first principle of existence. It is only in the instance of interpenetration of one into the other that the relation comes to be and also becomes more than what it was. The relationship. So it's basically talking about this theory that we're all one, we're all connected, everything's connected. It goes into protons, neutrinos, it goes into some stuff like that. It seems very fluffy to me. Goes into some other stuff. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
This is fascinating. Cleve Baxter, there he is.
Baxter.
Yes, now for our listeners, this is the Mr. Baxter, who experimented on the secret life of plants and plants' ability to feel feelings depending on how you treat them. The moral of the story was be nice to your plants because they can sense what's going on around them and react and communicate with each other, and you don't want them not to like you. So,
that's exactly right. And the funny things that are kind of just discovered in here is that the plants don't mind when humans are hurt unless they build a relationship with the human first. Okay, so hold on. It's gonna sound stupid. Here we go.
What is this? How do cats and dogs find their way home?
Oh, this is the shrimp thing.
That's always been a good question. We've heard cases when they go across the United States and find the owner again.
In one experiment, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, this is something you always hear about, these stories of cats and dogs finding their owners who've moved and,
hundreds of miles.
Hundreds, even thousands of miles. So how do they do that?
Let's scroll down and find out.
Maybe the secret's right here, buddy. Maybe.
But that he is following the direction of the intensity of the relationship bond, just as the salmon would swim upstream to its birthplace. Has salmon formed a relationship with its birthplace? Does it follow connection bonds in the relationship in the direction of increasing intensity to the point of origin? I think it's important to go backwards a little bit because they're talking about this bond that's created between things. Up here before it says that plants don't react to human cells getting injured somewhere. Here we go. More than this, plants, I'm sorry. Baxter discovered that threats or destruction of any life, even lower life forms, cause the plant to respond. More than this, plants can become jaded in response to the destruction of lower life forms, but not the destruction of human cells. So I was wrong. I got the opposite. In addition, he found that plants acceptable to individual bonds with men. Their being has something to create a personal bond. When someone is fond of a plant, then that relationship is thereby formed. That's interesting. He sets up an intercommunication which causes something so that this connection can be formed and I guess determined scientifically. This is really crazy. And that's Baxter. I'm glad you know more about him than I do. Yep, Baxter. Then it goes into the shrimp experiment. Here we go. In one experiment, the plants responded to the death of some shrimp that were placed next to them. In an expanded sense, it almost seems as though the plants are the nervous system of an immense planetary organism of life, as if the plants are responding so the cut in the body of life can be mended. Interesting. So it also talks about the exchange of information and some of these really.
Well, I did have to mention this was the predominant theory in the Middle Ages. You know, the organismic theory, the great chain of being, that everything was connected to everything. So now we're rediscovering ideas that people had hundreds of years ago, but may have not had any evidence to, back up.
And it gives credence to a lot of different theories, like the morphogenic field.
Yeah.
Also connects us to the oneness. Everyone always talks about the source. There was a recent report on the results of a scientific attempt to incorporate a chimpanzee into his family and teach him sign language. He considered himself human, but when he was returned to the chimpanzee group and later asked to describe them, it is reported that his signs indicated that he thought they were insects. Is the chimp more than a chimp now? Perhaps a chimp man. The relationship concept would indicate that he is now an organ in the organism called family. Oh, so it's just very bizarre stuff. A lot of different levels of weird stuff here.
Now, what sort of Desmond Morris? Remember The Naked Ape? That book?
Wow. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Morris' argument being that we're mostly animal with a brain, and we think of ourselves as, these kind of exceptional humans, but he points out to us how much of our behavior is still based in an animal type of behavior.
Which seems very logical to assume.
Again, whose document is this? Is this someone wrote a theme paper for?
I think this was a threat analysis by.
There's some. Wow. Changes in blood flow as a result of binary telepathic information above mean expectancy. What place does this?
I don't know what that word is either. I'm going to tilt up a little here. Russians report.
Oh, here, Soviet Kazyrev. The density of time around. Okay, stop.
This is weird.
For a second. Think about space-time metric engineering. Was we're told that these Tic Tacs and other vehicles at terahertz frequencies with metamaterials affect their refraction index, double negative materials that refract, light in a way that can make them be invisible, blue shifts, all that, And now you see something here called, essentially the density of space and time becomes a little more malleable. And now you have another statement here saying the same thing in relation to ESP. And so we've got the ESP UFO link here.
Big time. It connects that Ben Rich statement where I think of consciousness. If psychic powers are bending space-time and spacecraft are bending space-time, they would have a connection. This is stunning stuff.
That's right. He did say to someone, or was it Dr. Eric Walker, who said, unless you understand ESP, you don't have any hope of understanding the UFO phenomena.
Yep.
So again, it has to do with space-time malleability, which for most of us seems pretty fixed, but for materials operating at terahertz frequencies, metamaterials, refraction indexes change, then you get kind of a shift in the density of space-time. It becomes more malleable. You can speed it up, slow it down, and that's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's what Hal Footoff is referring to as space-time metric engineering.
There's some interesting stuff here with Hal as well. I think that this one might not be the Hal one. Let me just check. I got a couple Ingo things here from the CIA files. This one, I guess we'll find out right now, might be the Ed May one. Yes, this is the research done with Ingo and Ed May at Maimonides Medical Center. And it was about a noise-driven random number generator. And it worked on that white noise and did a calculation that was random. And Ingo Swann was off the charts in terms of consistency in producing very large anomalies in the statistical spread.
Yes.
So we can.
Now I'm just wondering here, is this before he worked with Gertrude Schmeidler at
I believe this is afterwards. This,
after?
I believe, because it's with Ed May, so he would have met him at SRI. That would have been a few years afterwards, I would have.
You're right. This would have been later on. This would have been.
So it talks about the numbers and how well they did and all that stuff. And you know, Ingo did great.
There's Ed. Look at that. Oh, wait, we have a date there. 76. So now we know.
I touch anything and it goes crazy.
This is, I didn't know Ed worked with Maimonides Medical Center, but that's out in, what borough of Manhattan, of New York City is that in?
I thought it was in Brooklyn. I think it's Brooklyn.
Right, Brooklyn, yeah. So that's interesting. So now we have more institutions that are connected. That's after Ingo started working at SRI, yeah.
So remote sensing, remote influence of physical sensing.
Oh, New York Media American Psychical Society, got it. You know, but there was a time when this was more open. There was a chapter of the AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science, that was formed by Margaret Mead.
Wow.
And who was it with Margaret Mead that formed the parapsychology subsection of the AAAS? So there actually were presentations about this at AAAS meetings. Now, I've been a subscriber to Science Magazine, their magazine, for more than 2 decades. And I still haven't seen a single article related on psi since I've been a subscriber in the 90s, which is like going back a long time. I've never seen a single psi article. But apparently in the 60s, Margaret Mead, from, you know, again, going back to that statement a few documents ago about how psychic functioning is related to the culture, Margaret Mead must have come across this working in the Pacific with the Pacific Islanders. It must have been something that they mentioned to her. She got interested in it or something. I mean, maybe someone knows more about it than I do. And she formed a parapsychology subsection with another researcher. And so it was more open. And here we have, you know, a document from the American Psychical Society in New York City, and they're doing these tests. And yet, in our time, you don't see universities doing this very much anymore.
No, you don't. I mean, I just did a couple episodes ago. I'm going to go grab another document really quickly here to show you something if I can on something else. Let me see if I can get away with this really quick. Videos. You know, I don't think I will, because it's going to take me a few minutes. But the bottom line is there have been so much research done into this topic over the past 30 years or 50 years, it's ridiculous. And if you go back into the early 1900s, they did DICE studies for almost 100 years on this stuff. This is well studied, well understood, well proven. And we know some facts if you really, really look at it. We know it's a low statistical phenomena. It's not a massive swing, you know, of reality. It's not a massive, you know, defiance of reality. It's a low statistical, low power phenomena. We know some other things about it, that it happens to have a statistical kind of spread. We think it might have something to do with entropy, blah, blah, blah. But do we really freaking know anything? I don't know, Doc. It seems like it's still a mystery 100 years after still studying this. We know it's real, but the mechanisms and everything else, wow. This is another one. Let's see who this is for. This is a CIA report. ESP and general psychic research has been of interest, and at times certain defining operations in both public and private, difficult to access, the CSP can private inbred and difficult to evaluate. Let me just go through a couple things here. To study objectives, to determine the status of ESP and psychic research, and to study applications of these findings. See, just what we were saying, it had the acceptance in the 60s and 70s. You know, it was okay to research psychic phenomena back then. We were more.
Yeah, it says right there, AAAS had articles appearing in their publication Science.
Just what we were saying.
And then it all came to an end. It all stopped. Now, okay, did it stop because the scientific community found it to be hard to swallow, or did the intelligence agencies encourage them to stop publishing these because they didn't want the information getting out because they considered it a national security threat?
Well, let's continue reading and find out.
We will find out, yes.
I don't know. But, you know, it's a great question. Of course, they say here that Newsweek and Time and a couple other magazines have done a couple things about it, but that was only on the heels of the Stanford research. This is still way back then. No one's doing stuff on this. And I think you ask a good question. Is there suppression going on of this issue, like there was the UFO issue? The Department of Defense publicly commented on the research, downplayed it. They downplayed ESP at the end of the Stanford program. But they knew, and we know that they knew that it worked. So let me just go to the conclusion of this one if there's an interesting conclusion here. Contributions of the study. Let me just see real quickly, I'm sorry. Okay, this one just seems really weird. I'm sorry with my mouse going crazy here. I think the viewers are gonna be very frustrated with me and hate me. Probably send me hate mail. So this is another bizarre document. It's giving us an approach to it, I guess. It should be studied. Oh, listen, okay, here we go. It should be studied. Literature survey should be done. Interviews with domestic and foreign investigators should be conducted to identify important ongoing projects. Major meetings of parapsychological associations and other associations should be attended and reported on. Appropriate visits should be arranged to examine procedures and methodologies being used by ESP and psychic phenomena investigators, and these findings should be submitted at the end of the project. So I guess they've been spying on parapsychological investigators. Let me just grab maybe one more document. How are we on time here, Doc?
Yeah, we're going to have to wrap it up. We're a little over an hour now, and I know we like to keep it about that length just to we can always come back to this at another date, but let's look at one more and we'll wrap it up. How about that?
Sure. Actually, I just want to show you a document here. This is not from these secret documents. This is just to show you just some of the many studies that have been done. These are some of the Smidler and Schmidt studies and a wide variety of PK, retrocausality, precognition, retrocognition, research studies and experiments, all of them successful. It's pretty stunning that there's been so many of these. Here's the ones that Dean Radin did. He did a bunch of these. Pear Lab, they found wildly successful conclusions. You know, anyone who looks at psi phenomena now and thinks that it's BS is kidding themselves. They are not rational. If you look at in any rational investigation of the research that's been done, you have to accept if the government right here has said that these are one of our biggest vulnerabilities after studying these phenomena, Doc, we're in a whole new ballgame. It's a whole new groundbreaking, reality-shattering ball of wax here that this ET phenomenon is.
I have to agree. I have to agree. I mean, we've been told publicly that there's no evidence really to support this, at least to justify the government's involvement in it, right? This is what we've been told. And yet here we are that they're extremely concerned about it. It seems your documents you're showing us are not just from the 60s, 70s, and early 80s before the, the RV program was canceled.
No, it was 2011 was the
some
latest.
of these are more recent, and it's just, all I can say is it seems like a schizophrenic approach to the subject, because at one hand you have universities who are pretty openly hostile to people that study this phenomena. I mean, you mentioned Dean Radin there, but he was let go from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, I believe. They didn't tell him it was because of psi research. They said he wasn't publishing enough, if I'm not mistaken. But he published quite a bit, and it was because of his interest in this subject. So the people who've put their careers into this have, had a lot of obstacles. And yet, on the other side, the government, you said you gave the figure of $200 million or something has been...
Yeah, at least.
In your video today. So, I mean, it's just, this is cuckoo. On one hand is studying it, saying, what are the implications? Let's figure it out. The other hand says, fire anyone who's involved in this at any official science
It's exactly.
organization, and don't publish any articles about it in any official science magazines ever again. I still haven't seen one in the time I've been a subscriber. The Put and Targ, I apparently think they had one earlier in the 70s. But I mean, this is just really cuckoo. And maybe it's just what we should expect from an emerging new paradigm is kind of a chaos. Like they don't know what to do with it.
It's exactly like the ET phenomena. They're suppressing the information over time because it represents a national defense, not only threat, but a area of research that we need to study and understand before the enemy does. It also could have tremendous economic, geopolitical implications. If you control a new power source and a new transportation, all these different things, it's just like the ET thing. It's this revelation about new power sources and new understandings that the government is holding on to. And you know what? We're adults. You know, we're not going to freak out if the government comes out and says, you know, ET, you know, it's not War of the Worlds. The War of the Worlds, it was way back in ignorance days, and it was an attack. It's very different nowadays. And the same thing with ESP. The government could come out and say, you know what? The powers of the mind have been proven true. You can heal each other. We can help this be a better world with positive thoughts, or we can make it a worse world with negative thoughts. And your thoughts have more power than you ever knew. And it's not a joke. It's not corny. It's not lovey-dovey, you know, flower hippie, you know, crystal throwing malarkey. This is how reality works. And what kind of world you want to be, you know, what kind of person do you want to be? It's crazy, Doc.
You know, you're asking us to be adults about this topic, and I don't think we've been adults as a society about this topic. I've encountered hostility myself just bringing this up at parties and places where scientists are around and things, and not everywhere, but you get it sometimes. And yet here is this prima facie evidence that you presented us with tonight and in your video published, you know, earlier today on YouTube, that major national security institutions they know it's real. They've known it's been real. They're concerned about the implications. They're studying what other countries are doing about it. We didn't even get into China. And here on the surface, we're told, oh, there's nothing to it, just keep moving along. Obviously, when I got involved with this in 1996 with Dr. Courtney Brown at Farsight Institute, I could see immediately people were getting results that didn't have any ordinary conventional explanation that I had ever heard about. But there they were drawing the pictures and engaging in this psychic functioning right before my eyes. I couldn't deny it, even if I didn't want to believe it was true. There it was true. But it is such a complex, set of attitudes from our society towards this topic, and it's a real mess. And now it's gone into the UFO field because we're told from the people who were at ATIP and who quit ATIP that the military higher-ups don't take it seriously enough. And yet at the bottom of your list here of this on the screen, they say the DoD controls several facilities where activities have been detected. We will leave that for your imagination. There are some movies you can watch about this that recently came out from Jeremy Corbell. But it's like
places like
we know about this.
Yeah.
Maelstrom. Yeah, Maelstrom. I'm looking at these things here that the threat scenarios, penetration of solid surfaces, censored. You know, this is coming out now because of the Nimitz incidents, and we've had Fravor and Kevin Day and a whole bunch of others now come out saying, yes, this is real. We've seen this. We'll just leave it for this tonight. But again, as we were saying, buddy, there has to be a moment where there comes an aha moment for society as a whole. Where society says, oh my God, it's real. Because the credibility of the people it's unimpeachable. And all of a sudden, too many people like Fravors and the Days and the people that operated our Navy flew the planes, operated the electronic systems, the guys in the radar Hawkeye planes above that survey the entire area and coordinate everything are telling us they saw it out the window of their E3 Hawkeye plane, right? And so I would just imagine that there's going to be a threshold. And then what's going to happen is it's going to bubble it backwards to these topics that you've been showing us tonight that we've known about since the 60s and 70s and 80s. And it's going to be quite a revelation in terms of scientific progress. That's just my gut feeling about it. It's just going to come all at once. It's going to be like a sonic boom of knowledge.
You know, I think you're right. And I think it's going to put all this stuff together for everyone. It makes them bubble backwards to consciousness, and that makes you bubble to this stuff. And then all of a sudden, reality itself starts to bubble and change. And thank you for making that ending there so succinct in that observation, Doc.
Well, thanks. No, thanks for presenting these documents. I'm going to have to think about this for a couple of weeks, what you've just presented to us, because again, I thought I would have known some of these from all the conferences, SSE, IRVA, and others. And yet here it's just brand new for me tonight and today. And it just shows that we have been lagging behind the reality of these phenomena. And we're going to find ourselves on reality's edge if we're not careful. So,
I can't think of a better way to end it than that, Doc.
okay, buddy.
Thanks, everyone. Gang, please leave us your thoughts below. Do you think this is a
thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And we will see you again soon.
And if you think it's a threat, let us know. If you don't think it's a threat, let us know. If you have
Put your comments in.
If you have telekinetic powers, don't tell us. Much love, gang.
Okay, guys. We'll see you next episode. Good night. Wow. Hey, wait a minute.
That was fun.
Oh my God.
End meeting.
When I pushed the record, it said now it's recording.
Oh no.